Welcome back to the Moving Pictures Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Holtzclaw. And this week is the second to last episode before season 2 is over, which is wild to me. But I haven't spoken to another human being today. So I'm a little all over the place now that I'm actually talking. And I'm trying to structure this episode as kind of like I'm interviewing myself, because I feel like last week that episode was a lot more cohesive because I was asking questions and then like having my guest answer. So I kind of want to try to do that. I'm not saying it will actually happen. I have ADD. I talk a lot. I have a lot of energy today. I like went for a walk. I just ate. I have a beer. Like I'm good to go. So I might ramble like I usually do, most likely. But I just wanted you guys to know that I'm trying out a new format to see if this is the vibe. So yeah, let's jump right into it. This week, I am going to be talking about the film Last Night in Soho, and I will be spoiling it for you, that's for sure. So, I'm going to give you guys a summary. An aspiring fashion designer, Eloise, but she goes by Ellie, is mysteriously able to enter the 1960s, where she encounters a dazzling wannabe singer, Sandy. However, the glamour is not all it appears to be, and the dreams of the past start to crack and splinter into something far darker. Basically, this is a British psychological horror film where Eloise goes to fashion school in London and ends up renting a somewhat like haunted room that transports her back to the 60s, where she can vicariously watch this main character, Sandy, kind of like live her life in the 60s. Eloise gets to witness and even experience Sandy being taken advantage of with her ambition to become a singer and performer, which brings about the darker part of the story and drags Eloise into the danger of the 60s that she's wrapped up in now. So, basically, I will say, Eloise being able to, like, transport to the 60s was very confusing, because the trailer, in my opinion, made it look like she became Sandy. Like, when she went back to the 60s, she was Sandy and got to, like, live in this different woman's body, but that was not the case. And I feel like I was also, I kept getting that idea of, okay, is she Sandy? Like, when she sleeps and has these, like, dreams, whatever, is she Sandy? Because they would do a lot of, but they would do a lot of reflection work. So they would do a lot, they would use a lot of mirrors, and they would have Sandy, like, putting on her lip gloss in the mirror, and you see Sandy standing in front of the mirror, but when you get a catch of her reflection, it's not Sandy, it's Eloise. And so it got confusing where you're like, okay, are we voyeurs as Eloise watching Sandy, or are we Sandy? Are we becoming Sandy when we sleep? And that was kind of hard to me to, like, reconcile when that wasn't the case. But they didn't really tell you what the case was. They just said, like, okay, well, she's not Sandy. So, like, Sandy is this other, like, entity, this other person. And basically, she's, like, watching Sandy's life unfold. And throughout the film, she actually gets to interact, and she can touch, and she can, like, run from people. And they're noticing her, these people in her dreams. They're noticing her, but that's not how it was right at the beginning. And so that was, there just isn't a lot of clarity on that. And so that was kind of frustrating. I think if the end hadn't been tied up so nicely, and, like, there hadn't been, like, this big dramatic twist, I don't think the movie would have been, like, that great. But I think the ending saved it. And basically, the ending is that, Eloise thought that Sandy was murdered, and so she's trying to figure out, like, going into these dreams and in real life, trying to figure out who killed this Sandy girl that she can see. But what actually happened was that Sandy was murdering the men that she was being pimped out to, and so there's a bunch of different people we think are the culprit, the one that killed her. And then in the end, we find out that she actually killed all of those men and buried them in the room that Eloise is renting. Um, it's like just a room in kind of like a it's a house, but this woman, Miss Collins, like rents out rooms for pretty cheap. And in the end, not only do we find out that, which doesn't make sense, that Eloise was wrong about who died, Sandy's still alive, but also we find out that Miss Collins, the woman who runs the like the rooms, the house, is Sandy. So again, another confusion happens where we thought that Eloise could like dream or be clairvoyant with dead people, but now we're finding out that not only were these like true events not 100% true from Eloise's standpoint, but also not everyone she was looking like dreaming of, having conversation, whatever, interacting with in these like hallucinations was dead. So I don't understand what the deal is. Is she clairvoyant? Is she hallucinating? Like, is she a schizophrenic like her mom was? What what's the deal here? Because that throws off like everything, right? Um, but I did that's literally what happened. She rents a room. It's haunted by Sandy's past, who owns the house, owns the room, and Eloise is seeing Sandy's life in the 60s, and then that's basically it. That's what happened. She figured out that Sandy was committing crimes because she was being prostituted out against her will. And so she became this murderous woman, and she actually is the woman that like Eloise has known for however many months. It's I'm not saying it wasn't a good movie, and I'm not saying that this isn't like a good plot or a good what like I'm not saying it's not good. But I'm not saying that it made sense. And that to me brings it down a little bit on my like rating. Um I like tried to look up what the deal was with Eloise's like powers, and nothing came up. Basically everyone's just as confused. There's a theory that she's just like clairvoyant, and being in this room with all these dead people just like gave her like the ability to do all this stuff, and I just gave her powers, I guess. And the other theory is that these are schizophrenic hallucinations, and she is actually mentally ill, like her mother was before her mom committed suicide. So, again, neither of these are like super solid theories, and neither of them 100% make sense. So, I think it's just kind of one of those things where you just kind of breeze past it and be like, okay, so something's up. Like, I get the gist. Um, which is just kind of annoying. I watched this with my friend Abby, and she was like, if I wasn't so confused, I think I would have been more compelled to like be into the story. And she fell asleep halfway through, so she was like, I think I would have stayed awake if it was not like if I knew what was happening, kind of. Okay. So really quick, I'm gonna give you guys the details, and then we can unpack everything that I just said. It's directed by Edgar Wright. This film is his first that includes female leads, and is his first collaboration with a female screenwriter, because he co-wrote it with Christy Wilson Carnes, and he also directed Baby Driver, which is how I know him, or like why I recognize him. And fun fact, Baby Driver was shot in Atlanta, and the scene where Ansel Elgort as Baby is dropping off his deaf guardian with like the at the assisted living home, that is actually the porch in my parents' neighborhood at like the clubhouse, like the community clubhouse, which is actually really cool. Anyway, so that's how I know him, and he also directed Hot Fuzz, which if you are into English film, if you grew up in England, if you were a teenager anywhere near the English culture, you've seen it, and it's really good. It's a good British film. I would recommend it. I think I watched it in like 8th grade at like a friend's sleepover when I was living in England. So I mean, they like bragged about it. They were really into it. So, I mean, I think it's pretty good. The cinematographer for this film is Chung Hoon Chung. The release date is October 22nd, 2021. This film was nominated for 2 BAFTA Film Awards, Outstanding British Film, and Best Sound. Okay, so my overall thoughts, I really liked it. I thought the cinematography and the editing and the sound was phenomenal. Like, very, very, very compelling. Very beautiful, very unique, very intriguing. I was confused about this clairvoyance thing and who everyone was and why this was happening, like, the whole time. So, that I would say makes the film less compelling. Not like the best I've ever seen. I feel like with confusing movies, like it's really easy to get the gist, but you can't get every little detail. And if you try, you're gonna miss other details and be more lost. And that's how I felt with this film, which was kind of a bummer. I really wanted to understand what was happening, and it was just kind of hard. They don't really explain. Mostly from like Eloise's perspective of just the whole perspective of like why this is happening, how this is happening. It just kind of happens, and I feel like they expected the audience to just kind of like accept it and not ask questions. Which in my opinion is poor form, because I think the audience should be asking questions. The audience should be so invested that they have thoughts, that they have opinions, that they want to know more. And so just kind of leaving the audience confused, in my opinion, isn't the best technique. But that's not to say that it's a bad movie, and that's not to say that I didn't like it. Because I did. And I would recommend you seeing it. It is supposed to be like a psychological horror. I think it's just like a thriller. Yeah, I mean, it is a psychological film too, which I think was fun. You get to get into the main character's head and literally be there, which is cool and unique. And like I said, the techniques they used to like represent this quote unquote dream, hallucination, whatever, was very cool and very unique. And I think the cinematography and just the angles and mise en scène with the costume design and the set design and the acting, all of that just really fit nicely together, which added points. You know, even though I was confused, it wasn't like the movie was hopeless and like pointless, if that makes sense. So Mediaversity, a website that reviews films, gave this film a D. LOL. So the technical score was 2 out of 5. The gender was 3.5 out of 5. They were glad that he was including women, Edgar Wright, in his films, and they were impressed by how he did so, except for one little aspect that I'll get into in a second. Race, 1 out of 5. They did not think this film was very diverse, which I agree with. There was only maybe like 1 or 2 non-white people. So, I mean, it's not diverse. So that score makes sense to me. Yeah, so then the overall score was a D. The themes that I think are super important here are, I mean, the big one, the glitz and the glam of the 60s, because that's a big chunk of the film. I think the colors, I mean, they're darker, and as the film progresses and as Eloise's psyche gets like deeper and deeper into the 60s dreams, hallucinations, whatever you want to call them, things get darker. Like her wardrobe changes. She's not wearing as many bright clothes. She has more dark makeup on. She like doesn't do so much with her hair. She's not as colorful as she was in the beginning, and that is also the case for Sandy. When Eloise is falsely seeing her die, she's wearing like all black, and it's very red lighting heavy. And in contrast, in that scene, Eloise is in her dark room. She's wearing black, and she's making out with her love interest. He's wearing all black. The lights aren't on. All you can see is red and blue flickering lights from the restaurant sign outside, which you see throughout the entire movie, but that's all that you see here is red and blue and black. So it's it's interesting that this glitz and glam and just kind of like idealization, glorification of the 60s just like really turns to mush throughout the film. And I think that is very representative of the darker topics that are coming out. And I liked that. I think it's a very logical notion that as things go downhill mentally, psychologically, for the characters, things are going downhill. That like their costumes and their attitudes and like their hair is also going to go downhill with them. And I liked that I noticed that, and I liked that other people noticed it when I researched it. I think it was really cool how they did that. And I think it was cool that it was obvious that they were doing this, but not in a tacky way. It was very gradual. And that's just something that really strikes me when I watch films, is like kind of how you can analyze all of that in comparison to each other, but also like alongside each other, if that makes sense. Okay, along with the glitz and the glam of the 60s is chivalry, mostly in the first bit, not like middle second half. But it just reminded me of how different things were in the 60s than they are now, just societally, and how women were in society versus today. I read this article on graylotglass.com, and they were analyzing this film, and I really liked this point. This is kind of, I guess, what I mean by like chivalry and like male and female relationships in the 60s. So it says, Last Night in Soho shows the push for sexual liberation, particularly with women, through the character of Sandy, who is free and even encouraged to pursue men. But the film also captures the darker layers beneath this liberation, revealing the unequal power dynamics where the men are free to objectify and use women with less societal taboo surrounding sex. Wow. I feel like I could make a whole episode on that, just like how women were portrayed in this film. The website, Mediaversity, that review article that I talked about before, along with like this poor score that they gave the film, they also note that like this cruel depiction of sex work, this like one-dimensional portrayal of sex work, is somewhat obtuse in nature, in that it doesn't depict consensual sex work. And what they're saying basically is that it's not like evolved or like progressive enough to address that, either the film itself, but also Edgar Wright is not progressive enough to address or point out or include that not all sex work is like forced. It's not all like trafficked. It's not all like get a pimp and like want to die. It's not all full of victims. But in my opinion, that's not important in this film. I think what's important is to understand that she was like exploited and she was forced into this. And Sandy was misled into thinking that Jack, her pimp, was going to make her a star for like her singing ability and her performance, not like her having sex with men. And I think the important thing here is that you realize that that's horrible, and it's common, and it has been common since the dawn of time. Sex trafficking, human trafficking, it's real and it's all over. And I think that's the important bit that they wanted to emphasize, is that like this dark element to this film is because Sandy was being forced into having sex with men that she didn't want to have sex with, and her singing career went nowhere. So she was totally duped, and then like of course miserably treated, horrible, like cruel stuff happened, right? And I think the whole reason that like you can kind of justify why she would kill all of these men and like hide them, like the reason she became a murderer is because she was miserable and being trafficked. Like she was being pimped out and she didn't have a choice. And I'm sure these men did horrible things to her. So it makes sense to me that they're not going to address consensual sex work when in the end she's a murderer. Like she's murdered so many men. Why would it make like it just wouldn't make sense if they wanted to throw in that some people have consensual like sex work or like participate in consensual sexual matters when she's not. And that's the whole reason like her psyche is so like dark and twisted. It's because of this horrible miserable like however many years she went through being pimped out against her will. So with all that being said, I think it is important that they included that. I think it is important that we talk about sex trafficking and human trafficking and exploitation. That's it happens, and it's really important to realize that it's not just going to happen to, like pretty women who are trying to get into show business and just like trusted the wrong guy, or a girl that's like doing drugs on the street. Like it's like it can be anyone. Like no it trafficking of any kind does not discriminate against race, sex, gender, wealth, social class, none of it. And that's what I liked about this film is that it really showcased like the misery, what can happen when bad things happen. Sorry, I totally went off on a tangent there. And that's also why I said that chivalry was like only in the first part of the movie because her being trafficked is not chivalrous, as we know. But it was just a different time then, and men did have a lot more power than women in the 60s. And I can understand why Sandy became this like murderous woman. I get it. Like, I'm not saying I would do that, obviously. I'm not saying it's okay, but like when you watch this film, you're like, oh, that makes sense. I get it. And it's actually like a big twist because you really do think that Sandy died. Like the whole film, you're thinking that Sandy is this dead woman who died because of like the sex work she was forced into, or like one of her pimp, or like one of her customers, like she made them unhappy, made them mad, whatever, and like she was gone. And so it's a cool twist to be like, wow, this woman has so many demons. It's been her the whole time. Um, I liked that. I thought that was a good twist. That was interesting. That was new. That was unique. And like female serial killers or like mass killers are like not that common. I know they're not uncommon, but it's not that common. So I don't know. It was like a cool story. Um, like the swing dancing and the clubs and like the fashion, I loved. I was so enamored. Abby and I were like, we were born in the wrong time because I wish we still like dance like that. I wish we still had parties like that. I wish like going into the city was like that. I don't know. It's just it seems so much better than like what I don't know, what our generation does now. And like I don't know, dating and hookup culture and like going to bars and stuff. I don't know. It's a very different vibe and I was digging it. Also, okay, sorry. Last thing that I want to say about trafficking is that according to the 2020 Trafficking in Persons report on state.gov, in the UK, over the past 5 years, they have estimated that there are up to 13,000 trafficking victims present in the UK. Um, it's not uncommon. It can happen to anyone. Um, and there's a lot of resources that you can go to if you think someone you know or yourself feels like you are being trafficked or about to be trafficked. Please go look online for your resources. Okay, that's the last I'm going to say on that. Cinematography. So it's my favorite part, right? Cinematography just astounds me. Like the lighting, the angles, the camera, it's amazing. And I think editing goes heavily hand in hand with cinematography. because like when that shot is so beautiful, the timing of like when you see it, how long you see it for, who's in it, like that kind of thing. They're just so heavily intertwined, and almost like every cinematographer that I've ever met or researched has like just such a great creative eye, and it's in such a unique way, and it just blows my mind. Um, Again, like I love the red and blue colors that are just accentuated through this. I love how the colors gradually get darker as the um, content gets darker, as the film, as the plot, as the characters get darker. So does the lighting, and so do the shadows, and like it's so do the costumes. It all comes together so nicely, and I think I'm gonna post some like screen grabs on my Instagram account because I really want you guys to kind of visualize what I'm talking about more in depth. But it's amazing, and it's very I don't know, noticeable in a way that you don't notice it. Does that make sense? Like it's not subtle. It's not like you're gonna miss it, but it's not like it's so out there that you're like, oh, they moved this light and they moved this to make a shadow. Like it just comes together so perfectly. And I also think that the editing style and the editing of like mirror shattering, glass breaking, like the hallucinations and all of that all together, I think makes this film really, really interesting. That's why I'm going to post pictures because I want you guys to see what I'm talking about. I read a New Yorker article. It was like kind of short, but about this movie. And it says that the stifled nightmares, in quotes, that she's having represent the unreal, but as they become more intertwined with like Ellie's modern day reality and modern day in general, it feels more like her life is becoming the nightmare. And I guess that's kind of what I mean by gradually increasing like in darkness, is that her dreams are now becoming nightmares in not only like her dreams but also in her real life now. It's like haunting her. The room is haunting her. Her dreams are haunting her. Her thoughts are haunting her. Like her own opinions and thoughts of like Sadie dying when she didn't actually die. Um, all of that just comes together and just kind of crashes. And I like how in the end, the edits you see are. I mean, she's hallucinating on drugs because Sandy, old Sandy, Miss Collins, has drugged her. But you see like everything colliding together. It's like Sandy and the 60s like kind of like demons that she has been like visited by. They're all there, and then it's mixing with reality, and it's presenting itself as a hallucination, like a drug induced hallucination. But you can kind of gather that this is really just happening in her head and that it needed to happen. Like these two worlds needed to collide so that she could get back to reality and figure out what was real and destroy what wasn't and destroy the past, like for her own sanity. And I think that's kind of where like the mental health angle comes into play. I don't think it's that Eloise is supposed to be schizophrenic like her mom. I think it's supposed to mislead you as kind of like a red herring, like, oh, maybe she does have a mental illness and that's why no one believes her, and that's why, you know, she kind of doubts herself, and that's why this is so like chaotic, is because she's actually mentally ill. But no, that's proven wrong, I think, by the end. When Sandy's like, yeah, I actually killed all the men. Like, I don't think that is, I don't think that's the answer. But I think that through that, we can see that literally everything in her psyche is like coming out at once and coming together and colliding, um, which I thought was really cool. Um, she also like it just to me it feels like this like these two worlds. I mean, as they collide, that I think even more so proves my point. But I think these two worlds are supposed to represent like good and evil, night and day, and I think it's supposed to kind of represent like the end. Okay, I think by the end you're supposed to see the allegory of like there really isn't good without bad and there isn't bad without good. Like there isn't black and white with that as well. Everything is in the gray area. Everything can be darker or lighter at some point, and you need both to collide to kind of like be in reality. And maybe I'm reaching. Maybe that's like not at all what Edgar Wright was going for, but I see a lot of the gray area in it, right? Like as she's panicking more about these dreams that she's having and like this life she's living when she goes to sleep that's becoming darker and haunting her more, it transcends into her real life, and she isn't sleeping because she doesn't want to go to sleep and like have the nightmares, but then the nightmares come and see her during the day. So it's like they see her in her reality when she's awake, in real life, all of it. So she can't escape one without the other. She can't have one without the other. She can't escape the bad and just have the good. She can't just have the good without the bad, you know? And I think that is kind of an allegory for life. And that's kind of the bigger picture that I take from it. If you're looking at a smaller scale, I think this was just a really cool thriller idea where it's like, let's see how psychological we can get. Let's see how deep into the rabbit hole of a psyche can be in this like plot, in this timeline, in this frame. I guess that's what, I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but I feel like that, I mean, that makes sense. I feel like that makes me enjoy the film more rather than just like, okay, well, this just happened. Like, it's like a fictional crime. I like that there's a bigger meaning to it. They just kind of stuck out to me. Honestly, you guys, that's kind of it. That was kind of the big stuff. You know, even when I was researching this, like, yeah, I could look into specifics on like how they made the costumes and how they did the set design. But I feel like what was really important was the whole theme of like the psyche and this allegory that I guess I've made up, maybe. But all of these, like all of the pieces of the set design and the costume design and the actors and the characters and the story and the plot, like all of that comes together to make this film. And I don't think that I don't think we would have gotten the ending, and I don't think we would have gotten this like bigger meaning without every single thing. So like without the cinematography, without those lights, without the color palette, without the costume design. You know what I'm saying? Like they all go in together to make this film what it is. And I don't think that without any of the details, this film would have been worth watching. And like I said, I also don't know that if the ending wasn't as twisted as it was, if it would really be worth watching. I honestly wanted more. I was hoping that it would be more. I was hoping that there would be more clarity. I was hoping there would be more horror. I was hoping that there would be more, just more details, less confusion, less figuring it out on my own, less skipping over the details because they didn't make sense with each other, and just kind of looking at the gist and being like, okay, well, I guess I get the majority of it, so it's fine. I feel like they could have done better. But if I'm like missing something, please let me know. I tried to do research. Like I've talked to people who have seen it and they kind of got the same thing I did. So if you understand it more or like you have more facts, please, please, please reach out to me. I love to learn and I love to hear other people's opinions. So please, please feel free to reach out to me. Next week is my final episode for season 2. And then I'll be taking a short break and coming back for season 3. And I'm just kind of in that time, I'm going to figure out what works, what isn't working, and I would love to hear feedback from you guys. So if you have any thoughts, please go on my website. There's a little form underneath each episode where you can like send me your thoughts, send me questions, whatever you want. Or you can DM me on the Moving Pictures Podcast on Instagram. Or you can DM my personal account. I'm on Instagram all the time. It's Katie_Holtzclaw. Please, any feedback, any thoughts, any comments, any concerns would be awesome. I always love getting those from you guys, and I love having the conversations that we do. So please continue to do that, and please continue to listen. I will see you guys next week for my season 2 finale, which is going to be really, really fun and a really cool movie. So look out for that post as well where I announce it. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you later. Bye.
Now if you run into a 5'2" covered with fur, diamond rings and all those things, bet your life it isn't her. Could she love? Could she woo?